Okay, and now it's time to talk about one of the true geniuses of literature, American or otherwise, romantic, whatever, Emily Dickinson. She's one of the most fascinating figures in literary history precisely for the reason that we know very little about her. She's the sort of undisputed mother of American poetry, and she sort of has this image as this ghostly kind of figure because she was not somebody who was a public figure. She wasn't somebody who was, like Coleridge or Byron or Shelley or Wordsworth or any of these other individuals who were like out there in the world trying to promote themselves. Dickinson was in many ways kind of a shut-in, although that is sometimes overstated. She did travel a lot when she was younger, but it is true that as she got older later in life, she pretty much just stayed in her room all the time. Didn't take many visitors. She was very sort of isolated from the public life. Despite this, though, she did write a lot of letters. She had a lot of personal correspondence, but really, the fact that only during her lifetime, only 11 of her poems were actually published, and it wasn't until after she died that her family went into a room and discovered this treasure trove of more than 1,800 poems that she'd written. Many of them were bundled up in little pieces of paper and tied off with string. And everybody was sort of like, oh, wow, there's a lot there. After her death, when they were found, actually a lot of them, she had requested that her correspondence be burned after dying, but luckily for us, this isn't something that people took her up on. They burnt some of her letters, but the poems were allowed to exist. People didn't quite know what to do with them at first, though, and a lot of them were subject to ridiculous editing, where they took away a lot of the eccentricities of her work. All the dashes that she has, the seemingly random capitalization, this sort of non-standard structure that she put her work in. These were things that people messed around with and tried to standardize, but eventually now in our era, they've been restored sort of to the original vision. The one thing in the versions that we're going to be talking about that is not in line with her initial ideas, that her poems, they did not have titles on them, but now it's standard that we number the poems and also that we title them based off of the first line of the work itself. But really, one thing that's important to sort of know about Dickinson is just that we don't have any of her own analysis of her poems, really. We're just sort of forced to go to them and try to figure them out on our own, which, we stumble about. We, try to do our best because they are notoriously difficult. But if you're willing to put in the time, Dickinson is, truly fantastic. So, with this in mind, she is unquestionably a total genius. If you find her to be incredibly difficult in first encounter, I don't blame you. Okay, she is a complicated read. A lot of times her diction is, difficult. All the dashes are difficult. We don't necessarily know what to do with it. I confess that for years I found Dickinson to be relatively complicated and unapproachable. Now she remains incredibly complicated, but very approachable. You just have to be willing to sort of think about it, open yourself up, and most of all, just try to enjoy it because she is unlike anyone else.